Today let's make some zipper pouches from woven fabric. Hi everyone, it's Steph and welcome to another video. Lately we've had some really weird things happening here. Normally our winters are cool and dry, but this winter has been really wet and we even had some hail, which we normally only get in our summers. And our summers tend to be like stormy and humid and hot. And then just yesterday, 16th of August, we got an earthquake just north of Brisbane, which is so unusual for us. So yeah, really weird things. But anyway, let's get on to some fun stuff. I'm weaving a multicoloured houndstooth pattern where white is the main colour and then every second colour is one of three, which is either a blue, a purple or a deep grey. So you achieve this by alternating two white threads with two different coloured threads, and you repeat the warp into the weft, so it's a fairly simple pattern. I'm using white as my base colour and I've got a little bit left over from a previous project, so I'll use that up first. I'm also using this really pretty periwinkle blue and a mauve pale, well it's not really pale but it's a nice mauve colour, and also a deep charcoal. All of these are Maurice Brassard 8-4 cotton, which is my favourite cotton. I'm popping these on my trusty ribbon holder for ease of warping. I'll be using my 60cm loom or a 24-inch I think, and my 10 dent reed. I've already marked out the start and end of my warping project. I'll need my warping hook, tape measure and a pair of scissors, and I've got 4 shuttles that I'll also be using for the colours and the weft. And for my warping peg, I like to use a coat rack and of course some clamps to hold it all down. For the length of the warp, I'm just using the length of my dining table, which is 1.9 meters, or I think it's 76 inches for this project. So I've just clamped down my coat rack or my warping peg, and at the other end I'm clamping down my loom to my table and I'm attaching my 10 dent reed. And you can see here the weaving width for this project is 36 centimeters or 14 inches. As always, I like to attach my apron rod to the heddle, which really helps with tension. I'm going to tie on and do all of the white in one go. And to warp up for this, it's a houndstooth, so you just need to warp your main colour through every second slot. So I continue that until all of the white is done. Now you can absolutely do all of your colours at once like this, or you can do them consecutively. It's really up to you, and it's a personal preference. So once I've got that tied off and done, I'm moving on to my next colour, which is the mauve. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to warp through every third spare slot. So every third spare slot will be the mauve colour, and I'll continue doing this the whole way across the warp until that's done, and then I'll tie that off. If you choose to warp this way, after each colour I really recommend that you stop and check to make sure you haven't missed any slots or warped through the wrong slots, because it's easier to fix now than later. The next colour is the periwinkle blue, and we're going to warp through every second remaining slot across the warp. Once that's done, you can go ahead and tie that off. And the last colour is the charcoal, and we're going to warp through all of the remaining slots. So all of the pattern will be white, mauve, white, blue, white, charcoal, repeat across the whole warp. I always like to end on a white as well. Last quick check to make sure I haven't missed any slots or stuffed up any colours. Then I can unhook my apron rod from the heddle, unhook my loom from the table, and then using thick brown paper as a warp separator, or whatever you like to use, that's just what I use, wind on towards the pegs or wind on using your preferred method, and then we can get into threading and weaving. Once you've got your loom on your stand or on your table, just snip off all the looped ends and then we can get to threading. Threading is super simple. If you're working left to right like me, just pull out one thread from the slot and pop it into the hole to the right. If you are working right to left, pull out a thread and pop it into the hole to the left. Super easy and super simple. I don't need a fringe for this project, so I'm choosing to lash on to save waste. So I grab some scrap yarn that's about 5 to 6 times the width of the loom. Grab a group of 8 threads and pop a knot down the bottom. Then grab a knotted group, divide that group in half, drop your scrap yarn through the top and around the bottom of the apron rod, and then do the same again. Grab the next group of knotted threads, divide in half, drop the yarn through the top, around the bottom of the apron rod, and continue across the warp. As you go, just stop and tighten from where you were, and that really helps when you get to the end so you don't have to tighten the whole lot. To check that your tension is even, just strum the warp behind the heddle and that'll tell you where there's any slack areas that you might need to tighten up. Remember, it doesn't need to be super tight, it just needs to be even. Now we can spread the warp. I prefer to use scrap yarn. I know there's lots of other different ways out there. Use whatever method you feel comfortable with. So I grab some scrap yarn and throw 3 picks without beating. So throw a pick, change shed, throw a pick, change shed, throw another pick, and then once you've got your 3 picks, then beat those 3 picks down together towards your knots, making sure that you've got a nice straight line down the bottom. Then repeat this with another 3 picks without beating, and then beat the second 3 picks down towards the knots, and that's usually all I need to do to spread my warp. Feel free to tighten up and wind on a little bit as you go through this as well. For the weft order for weaving the multicoloured houndstooth, just mirror exactly the warp. So 2 picks of white, 2 picks of mauve, 2 picks of white, 2 picks of periwinkle, 2 picks of white, and then 2 picks of charcoal, and repeat. Super simple and easy, very, very effective. And this is what it's looking like right now. I want to show you how you can carry the yarn up the side instead of ending off for each colour. It doesn't matter what it looks like for what I'm doing with this fabric, but here you can see it gives it a really pretty barber pole effect on your selvage. If you don't like that, then definitely end off for each colour. It's really just a choice. But to do the carry the yarn up the side, you can see here my next colour is charcoal. So I'm pulling that colour from underneath, and then when I throw the pick, you can see that the charcoal is going over the top of all of the other colours. And when I throw a pick and beat, you can see that that's gone over the top. Then we do our second pick of charcoal, then we're back to white. So I pull up all of the other colours and then pull the white from underneath, throw the pick, then you can see that the white goes over the top and then pulls in all of the other colours when you beat, giving it that barber pole effect on the side. Super easy. I'm really loving how this fabric is looking. I think this would make a really pretty jacket, maybe with a pair of jeans or a nice purple top. And I've definitely filed that away in the back of my brain for another time. Now that I've come to 45 centimeters, I'm going to change and do just the white as the weft. I actually want 3 different kinds of fabrics, maybe even 4 if I can get away with it, so that I've got 3 or 4 different kinds of zipper pouches. So 45 centimeters I think is about 17 inches for the third one. I just did charcoal as the weft, and that is also one of my favorites. I'd have to say probably the houndstooth, the multicolour houndstooth, the first one, and then the charcoal for the weft is my second favourite. As I came to the end of weaving the charcoal as the weft, I realised I was going to have a little bit of extra fabric, so I decided to weave a little bit more for that as well. I know that there is not going to be enough for another pouch, so I just did the blue as the weft with a couple of stripes of purple, and I'll pop that one aside. I think I got 31 centimetres out of that once I'd done as much as I could. I cut the weaving from the loom, and this is what it's looking like. So that's the charcoal, the white, and then the multicoloured houndstooth. I think these are going to make really pretty zipper pouches, and I can't wait to get sewing. I put these through my washing machine on the gentle cycle with a little bit of dish soap just to get rid of any machine oils from making the yarn, and ran it through my dryer. You can also dry flat in the shade. Then I gave it a really good iron, ready to get sewing. Before I could get sewing, however, I had this idea about having a twill fabric that I could also sew into zipper pouches. So if you want to know how to do twill on a rigid heddle loom, I've got 2 videos, and I will link them in the description for you, about how to understand twill on a rigid heddle loom, and also how to warp and weave twill on a rigid heddle loom. I decided to use up some of my older crochet cotton stash for this one, and I chose a whole group of different coloured reds for this project. So I chose 4 different red colours that I thought would make a nice project, but also having them in groups of 6 threads made it a little bit easier to understand twill on a rigid heddle loom. There are a couple of reasons why I was thinking about a twill fabric for the zipper pouches, and one is that I wanted to show you all that it isn't that scary, that it's actually quite easy once you know how and with a little bit of practice, but also twill fabric is a lot hardier than a normal plain weave. Plain weave is a very hardy fabric, don't get me wrong, but twill is just that next level, which is why jeans are made out of twill, usually a 2-1 or a 3-1 twill. So I was thinking maybe I can make zipper pouches out of some twill fabric and then use them and see which one was better, or if there was any difference between the 2 kinds of fabric, plain weave versus a twill weave. I was planning on making the Christmas towels this year all twill weave, but I got the feeling, and also a friend said to me, that it might be a little bit too much. And I do want to make the Christmas towels something that beginners can also make. But I really do want to put twill weave in there somehow. Maybe I should just do 1 or 2. But what I will do is send out a newsletter and ask you what you think. So tomorrow I'll be working on my first newsletter, and I'll get that sent out to everybody. If you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, first, don't worry, because I haven't actually sent one yet, so you haven't missed out on anything. But just pop to my website. I'll link that in the description below so that you can sign up for sporadic newsletters if you feel that you wish to. Anyway, enough waffling on. Once I'd finished weaving, I cut the weaving from the loom and just knotted all of the ends, and as the same with the previous fabric, I kind of did something a little bit different with the weft for each section, and each section was 45 centimetres with a little bit left over. And I think all of these look really lovely. You can feel the fabric is a little bit denser than normal fabric, but I popped that through my washing machine on the delicate cycle exactly the same, ran it through the dryer, so it's all pre-shrunk, ready to sew after a good iron. To separate all of the pieces, I zigzagged up near the beginning and the end of the weaving, and also either side of where I wanted to cut through to separate the pieces. Then I was able to cut through the middle to separate them all. Once that was all done, I folded them up and put them to one side so that I could then start working on the red twill fabric. I repeated the same steps with the red fabric in zigzagging and then cutting apart. I did cut these down as well to exactly match the dimensions given by the video that I watched. I don't want to give the dimensions and the exact stuff because I don't want to step on anyone's toes for videos. I'm not exactly sure what the rules are there. I have linked the video that I watched down below so you can watch it yourself. It's just not my pattern and not from my head, so I feel like I just need to do the right thing. I attached some iron-on interfacing to the piece and also cut some 100% cotton lining fabric exactly the same size. And here's where things go a little bit hairy. I put the fabric down, I pulled the zipper apart and put one on each side and then put the lining fabric on top. And then I used some quilting clips and then sewed down the sides, which is exactly the right thing to do. However, I did discover later that I had done the wrong thing, and I'll show you exactly what I've done so you don't make the same mistake. But this is what I'm doing. Also, I don't have a zipper foot, or if I do have one, I can't find it. So for me, I just moved my needle position over to the left, and that actually worked beautifully as well. So that's a really good tip if you're not used to sewing. Once I'd sewn the sides, I turned this out to right sides out and flattened it all down so that I could top stitch on the sides. I just did a finger press on both sides, but you could absolutely iron this as well. Then I top stitched both sides to make the edges sit nice and flat. So here is the moment where I started to realize that I had actually put the zipper pieces wrong side out so that the zippers aren't going to match because the actual teeth are on the inside instead of the outside. So I put that to one side after a couple of choice words and then repeated all of the steps with a second piece of fabric and made sure that the teeth were down. And just remember that when you do your own. Also, another really good tip is when you take your zipper apart and then you go to put your actual zipper tab back on, just remove 4 teeth from the right side. Once you've removed those 4 teeth, then you can reattach your actual zipper tab. So you put one side on and then thread through the other side until you hear a click, and then you can pull the zipper back down. I had to Google this, and when I did the other pouches, I actually cut the zipper so it was a couple of centimeters bigger, or half an inch bigger than the piece, so the cut teeth didn't show. And once I'd sewn it, I just snipped that bit off. So a little bit of a tip for when you do your own. So now I put the zipper on one side and smoothed and folded it all down, making sure that the lining also lined up. And then I snipped just a tiny little piece off each corner. And this is great because it actually helps you line up the zipper when you go to put it together differently. So then I can open it out and I line up the zipper so it perfectly matches that little V. And then I just popped a couple of quilting clips on each end to keep them just perfectly lined up. Once that was done, I measured in from the edges 4 centimeters and then up from the bottom 3 centimeters on each corner and cut those corners out. Once those boxed corners were cut out, I turned it inside out. Then I can pull everything together so the zipper's in the middle, and I can then sew those sides together. I lined up again both sides, making sure that the zipper aligned with that little notch on both ends. I then got some grosgrain ribbon and I cut 5 centimeters, folded it in half, and then just popped it in between the 2 right sides of the fabric and then pinned that down. Bit of a tip here. When you put that grosgrain ribbon in, pull it out so that it's a little bit further out than where it needs to be. You can just snip it off later. And the reason is, on one of my pouches, I actually missed catching that when I sewed the sides together. So pull it out just a little bit further than where you need to. So when you sew those sides down, you're actually going to make sure that you catch both the ends of that grosgrain ribbon, and then you can snip them off and tidy them up later. Once I finished sewing those sides down, I reached in between the lining and the fabric and then reached into where the zipper is in the middle and grabbed what was on the other side and pulled it through. This was a little tricky in getting it through, and I had to do a little bit of wriggling, but once I got it through, it was all good. Basically, you're pulling it through where the zipper is in the middle. Here I'm just pushing everything out so that it sits nicely. Then I'm going to turn it right side out so I can do the sides. This is what it's looking like right now. Really cute. Now, just like any boxed corners, we're going to line up both of those edges, and then I'm just popping a quilting clip in to keep them where they need to be, and then we're going to sew those edges. I used a 1/4 inch seam along these edges. Just make sure that the lining is there and lined up so that you catch the lining. I did on one of my pouches miss the lining just a little bit, so I know we're sewing on the right side, but we're now going to turn it inside out and then sew again on the inside. So this covers those raw edges on the inside, and they look really, really cute. The little pouches are now done. I'm just pushing all of the corners out. They are looking so, so cute. My daughter-in-law took one of these the day that I made them, but I think the other little houndstooth one, I think I'd like to put all my notions in for when I knit my socks. I'm just going to hand sew some labels on all of these as well. I did also do some flat zipper pouches for my journals, and again, you can Google how to do these. There's like a million out there. I did film it, but once again, I had a corrupted SD card and lost it anyway. But I hope you enjoy the review, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you as always. I hope you all have a wonderful day.